Hello, friends. Welcome to Unacademy. This is me, Dr. Sidharth Arora. Starting today, my friends, I am starting a brand new series on YouTube, which is the summary of amongst the most favorite book that I've ever read. A book which is really hard hitting, a book which is reflective, which is an emotional summary, and a legal understanding of what the Constitution is, what it started out to be, where we are, and where will it ultimately go, or what was our ultimate dream, is most beautifully and succinctly described in this book, which is the Indian Constitution, the cornerstone of a nation by Granville. As I said, it is amongst my favorite books, and I want all of you to get a glimpse into the minds of one of those legal luminaries who understood, at least and to a large extent, what our founding fathers of the Constitution were writing while they were discussing in our Constituent Assembly. So, this book should open your minds, should open your hearts to and give you an opportunity to reflect upon what our Constitution is. So, let's get into the journey. Now, this is a very thick book, and as I said, it is a very dense book at the same time. So, it will take some time. We'll go slowly, steadily, and I'll summarize it page by page. In whatever little understanding and limited subject of the subject understanding that I have, I'll try and do justice to this amazing book, and I hope you will enjoy this. So, this is part one of the summary of, as I said, I'm going to go page by page. So, let's go page by page and understand this. But instead of just doing it page by page, might as well just absorb the wisdom behind this book. So let's start, and I hope you enjoy this series. It is going to be a long series. If I get your support, I'll be able to finish it. If I don't get your support, it's all okay. So let's start. The Indian Constitution, Cornerstone of a Nation by Granville Austin. Before I start, so this is the foundation batch for IAS 2025 that we have launched. Okay, it will be live from October 21, 2023. Please use the code SIDLIVE to get a huge discount. Don't miss this opportunity. I have repeated it often and above that once you're preparing for an exam of the stature of UPSC examination, you must have financial reality in your mind, and that is why you should take full advantage of such offers. Also, very important is this is our Hall of Fame, so to say, in the sense that if you prepare realistically, then you will have an opportunity of your name being one amongst these toppers. Please remember to use my code SEDLIVE to get huge discounts while you are taking Unacademy offers. And in case you have a money problem, don't worry. EMI as low as 4,364 per month is available to you. Use special code SEDLIVE to get a huge discount. So, and this is my Telegram channel. If you want to join, you can utilize the link that is given in the last part of the slide, or you can use your mobile camera, scan the code, and you will be a part of my Telegram channel. Let's start this. So, if you have this book, which is Granville on Austin's book, The Indian Constitution Cornerstone of a Nation, you might as well keep it handy. If you don't have this book, it's okay. I've done what is actually a true blue page by page summary. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this. So this book starts with amongst the most um, momentous event which marked the beginning of our independence celebration, so to say. 15th August 1947, we started with that historic speech by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru as our first Prime Minister. The speech was called as Tryst with Destiny. And the speech says, long years ago we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge, not wholly or in full measure, but very substantially. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. This is, as I said, this is not my way of writing. This is exactly from Austin's book. So we are going exactly page by page, line by line. So why does Austin start with Tryst with Destiny speech? So Why is he saying that Tryst with Destiny should begin the discussion or the book or the summarization of whatever we are going to study about the journey of making the constitution? Because if you read this speech carefully, then it says everything that is required to be said with regards to the struggle that India went through. For example, long years ago, yes, that was 250 years of the colonial rule. Now, colonialism, you have to appreciate, colonialism was just another name by which they created a practical slave state. Though we were not technically a slave state, but they made us feel like one. In our own country, we were made to feel like second grade citizens. Now, do you think that it should be really distinguished between a slave state and a colonialism? I'm not sure of this part. But in the quest of understanding the technical nitty gritties, we call ourselves a colony. However, we hardly had any civil rights. We hardly had any political rights. In our own country, we were made to bow before the king or the queen of England. We were being ruled by His Majesty's government or the Her Majesty's government. So, what is Pandit Nehru saying? He's saying, long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge. Now, the point here is, where was this tryst with destiny being made? Every stage, every step of the national freedom struggle, we were somehow coming together and seeing the dream of an India of the future, which will be independent, which will be based on certain foundations of justice, of equality, and so on and so forth. So all of these things would are tryst with destiny. One day that will happen. So if you recall, okay, Ram Prasad Bismil's poem on this was very clear. It said, हम अभी से क्या बताएं क्या हमारे दिल में है, देखना है जोर कितना बाजुए कातिल में है. हम अभी से क्या बताएं. That's the point. Trust with destiny is that we will be there one day. When we will be there, we will achieve or we will construct the India of our dreams. So, not wholly or in full measure, but very substantially. Now, what does that mean? It's a practically impossible. Again, quoting Nehru in this, I'm just trying to draw some kind of analogies between Twisted Destiny and what some other thinkers said either pre or post the speech. Not wholly or in full measure, Pandit Nehru himself said at one stage that the work of the nation shall never be complete. There will be struggles, there will be challenges, and those challenges will keep on coming till kingdom come, because that's what the destiny of every nation is, to keep fighting, to keep meeting challenges, but very substantially. Does not mean that the work is going to be left incomplete or it is an impossible task to be absolutely zero in terms of pendency. Does not mean that we would not continue with what we wanted to or what we set out to. At the stroke of midnight hours, it is the self-explanatory point. We did it exactly at the midnight hour when the world sleeps. India will awake to life and freedom. Now, this could be understood in two ways, right? One very categorically, or one very literally, in the sense that we were at the midnight hour. Although some low life thinkers have actually quipped on this point also, that how can everybody be sleeping since the global clock is something else. Now, that's very funny. But the other one was that when the world sleeps, and the world sleeps probably towards India, how many of them would have trusted that India, which is with such diversity, India with such poverty at that stage, India being a victim of colonialism for 200 years, 250 years, and the victim of a very bloody partition just recently, would survive, would flourish, and would become one of the strongest countries in the world. Who would have thought that India will awake to life and freedom? So, the world today, you are sleeping, but we will awake to life and freedom. So, this is where Granville Austin starts. And I say how beautiful and what an apt beginning for entire book to start with. Now the second part, or the second page rather, starts with very important. I think it should be most important. That why did we start with the demand of the Constituent Assembly in the first place? What, first of all, why do you want a Constituent Assembly? What does the Constituent Assembly do for you? A Constituent Assembly is a group of people who will belong to your country, who represent your country, who represent your nation. Your country needs a constitution. What is a constitution? A constitution is a fundamental law of the land. This constitution has to be made by your own people because they understand your own social dynamics. So it was mutually agreed between the members of the Congress at that time, primarily Congress and probably Muslim League and the other political parties, that we need to have a constituent assembly. If you look at it on a very technical point of view, it was Mr. M.N. Roy who suggested for the first time that we should have our own constituent assembly. And that demand goes back way back to 1934. It was in 1935 that Congress started demanding formally that we should have our own constituent assembly. But what was the underlying thought process behind this? That thought process that we chose to have our own constituent assembly started with probably Mahatma Gandhi saying, and the words are, Indians must shape their own destiny. That only in the hands of Indians could India become herself. This is very important. Why do you have to relate to this part? Because if it goes back probably 1773, that is when they started passing what are called as regulating acts, charter acts, then Government of India Acts of 1858, the Indian Councils Act of 1861, 1892, 1909, then the Government of India Acts of 1919, 1935. Where is an Indian making a law for in India, Indian society? That was what was Mahatma Gandhi's views on this. That it should be India will have their own constitution by a thought process which will be purely Indian. And this is not the only thing. It was related to a very big process of what is called as Swaraj. Swaraj or self rule was a huge concept which was to be understood not as the gift of the British Parliament. Please understand, laws there are abundant. However, I question the wisdom behind Britishers making a law for us. Who are they to make a law for us? Because one day we will become sovereign. That day of sovereignty will be external sovereignty as well as internal sovereignty. On that day would be Swaraj. On that day we should have a law which has to be made, legislated, made, created by us Indians for us. Because only an Indian Constituent Assembly will be able to reflect upon the wishes of the people of India, and that those representatives will have to come together, develop a consensus, and make what is the fundamental law of the land, which will be later on the Constitution of India. So, for that purpose, we needed a Constituent Assembly. So, this Constituent Assembly has to be made and as soon as possible. So, Indian National Congress adopted this entire concept and said that the only successive alternative to a white paper is a constitution drawn by the Constituent Assembly. So what had happened was Britishers, when the demand started rising, when the demand was amped, the demand was increased that we want our own constitution, we want our own say in the form of law. Britishers close to Government of India Act 1935. That's how history goes. Britishers close to Government of India Act 1935 took out what is called as a white paper on constitutional reforms. You might as well do yourself a favor by writing this word. So they took out what is called as a white paper on constitutional reforms. And they thought, now what is a white paper? White paper is an opportunity given by the government. And in that the government says that these are the points on which we are going to discuss. So let's discuss so that we shed some light on what are right and wrong about this part. So white paper is like mudda or the agenda on which the discussion would happen. So they decided to take out a white paper on constitutional reforms, which ultimately led into the Government of India Act of 1935. Indian National Congress was not very particularly happy about it. The reason was that India wanted a law by Indians. And please remember, make no mistake about it, by that time, India had pretty much become into a self-reliant understanding of what India wanted to be after independence. We are already demanding Purna Swaraj by 26 January of 1930. Indian National Congress by that time had a fair share of lawyers and academicians and activists, and there was exposure of what is happening in the international scenario. We knew what we wanted. So Indian National Congress said that instead of a white paper on the constitutional reforms, we should have been given an opportunity to become a constituent assembly, to make a constituent assembly, get representation from across the country. And there are a bunch of issues that we need to address, but those bunch of issues can be best addressed by Indians themselves as compared to or as opposed to the Britishers. So this is white paper and constitution. I'm going page by page by Granville Austin's, whatever the sequence, you like it or not, but amongst the most beautiful sequence. So go for this. So at this stage, we go we go very fast ahead, and we go all the way till 1945. 1945 Shimla Conference happens, and at that time Lord Wavell was the Viceroy of England to India. And at that time, the Congress reiterated that we would only accept a constitution drawn from the people without any interference by a foreign authority. Now, that marks a question. That is a very important question on this part. That any other alternative that a British Parliament is making a law for us or something on those lines would have been violative of the our concept of sovereignty. So we did not want any of those parts. So Baba Sahib in the Constituent Assembly on the last day, he actually said this 26 November 1949. His speech says very categorically that let there be no doubt on this, that this Constituent Assembly derives its power from the sovereign authority of the people of India and not from the British Parliament. Very clear on this part. And this is coming, and this thought process is a continuum of various discussions, various petitions, various rhetorics coming from Indian National Congress all this while. So at this stage, if you want to write, I just summarize what is a white paper. So this question might come sometimes in your mains exam. So what is white paper? I've written an exact answer. White papers are commonly used by governments, organizations, institutions to outline policy objectives, present research findings, or propose solutions to complex problems. They typically provide a comprehensive analysis of the issue at hand, including background information, data, and evidence to support the claims or proposals. In governance, a white paper serves several purposes: policy development, public consultation, information setting standards, etc. So as I told you, I gave you at least the four walls of this part. You can always fill in this. And these are exact words. So in case such a question comes in your mains examination, you might as well write this answer. So I question the very need of a white paper on constitutional reforms, because what we really needed at that time was that our demand for the constitutional assembly be met by the British Parliament. They did not do it, at least till the longest time, till the second cabinet mission in 1946 came along. Second cabinet mission on 1946 gave us what is called as a constitutional or a legal sanction to form our own constituent assembly. And that's where the story now goes ahead. So if I look at this question, what would be your answer? Which of the following laws during British Raj was the result of white paper on constitutional reforms? A. Government of India Act 1858. B. Government of India Act of 1919. C. Government of India Act of 1935. D. Indian Independence Act of 1947. Go ahead, take a swing, try and write this answer A, B, C, or D in the comment section. I'll be happy. You have 30 seconds to write this answer. Let's see if you are clear on this part. I've already told you all these parts. So now that we are doing this book, why not do complete justice and try and understand this book absolutely as it should be? So which of the following laws during British Raj was the result of white paper? Quickly answer. Answer, of course, I've already told you, is C. That is the Government of India Act of 1935. But we were desiring something more. We were desiring our own Constituent Assembly. Those of amongst you who are already history students or already started from me in the terms of historical underpinnings, you remember that August 8th of 1940, Lord Linlithgow proposed what is called as the August Offer, which was a principal acceptance of they giving us Constituent Assembly. Then 1942, Cripps Mission comes to formalize that offer, but it still does not manifest into reality because of the Muslim League not being on the same page. In fact, they were demanding Pakistan as the second state. All of that created problem. And then only in 1946, the second cabinet mission, and finally we landed into the first opportunity to elect our own constituent assembly. So this is where the story was going. So as I said, I will be adding on certain facts. Let's fill in some gaps. May not be necessarily be present in this book, but since you are students, let's see this one. So sometimes I question myself, or sometimes you may be wondering, what happened suddenly? 1935 Government of India Act 1935 is passed, and we are actually nowhere close to our ultimate dream of becoming a sovereign nation. What happened? Suddenly, what happened that we had the guts, we had the resolve to, in the words of Mahatma Gandhi himself, to do what is called do or die, karo ya maro. What happened? Now, as I said, sometimes crisis is a very crucial element in the life of a person, individual, a society, a family, or sometimes even a nation. Crisis never creates character. Crisis always reveals a character. By that time, Indians were mature enough. Indians had fought a long, protracted freedom struggle already. But when India joined World War II, we realized that we are providing men, material, machines, everything, and money also to aid Britishers in a war which was against a formidable adversary, which was the Nazi Germany, and in fact on the Eastern Front even Japan. Now by that time, Indians had a very general awareness of nationality and national dignity. But by World War II, the beginning or even during the course or by the end of it, we realized we can act as a unit. In fact, in all honesty, it was Indians who won the World War II against Nazi Germany. I don't think Britishers alone could have even come close to having beaten a formidable military machine of the Nazi Germany of Hitler. But Indians fought, and now suddenly that thing started turning into confidence. One emotion turned into the other, and the way we conducted ourselves during World War II, we actually realized that we can act as a corporate unit. So it's like, a child coming into adulthood. So we suddenly realized, I, I think we can hold our own and we can start this. So even Mahatma Gandhi, who had a pretty skeptical attitude in 1934, he actually realized somewhere around that time that Indians are far more mature, far better prepared to declare that we will have our own constituent assembly, or rather, we are ready for independence, at least compared to the last decade. And that is probably the reason that the failure of Cripps mission uh, saw Mahatma Gandhi take a step which many thinkers say that it was most un-Gandhian of movement, which was the Quit India movement. Do or die. It's a big statement. Karo ya maro. That's a big statement. In fact, Quit India movement has been correctly described as a very non-Gandhian kind of movement because violence was allowed. Right. And in the words of Mahatma Gandhi himself, he said it will be insulting to our very existence if Britishers are continuing to stay in India. So at this stage, suddenly there is change of emotion. So World War II really helped, and we start getting ready for this. By that time, Cripps had also come, and Cripps had actually said that there is an absolute realistic idea that we are absolutely on the same page, that an elected body of Indians In other words, put it in bracket, Constituent Assembly should frame the Indian Constitution. He was ready. We knew they were ready. At least mentally they were ready. All it took was our being on the same page. The Muslim League and the Indian National Congress being on the same page. And voila, we are good to go. So these things, and added to the confidence of World War II, added to the confidence of the national leaders, including Mahatma Gandhi, it was an apt opportunity for us to demand for the Constituent Assembly. So, just to recall, in which year did the Cripps mission come to India? A 1858, B 1919, C 1942, D 1946. Let's see if you can recall at a short notice like this. In which year did the Cripps mission come to India? 1858, 1919, 1942, 1946. All right. So quickly write in comments A, B, C, or D. You have 5 more seconds. And the answer, of course, is C. That is 1942. However, Cripps mission failed to deliver on what it had come to deliver. That is, they promised, or they wanted to formalize the offer which was given in 1940 to give us a Constituent Assembly. They couldn't give because of variety of reasons. Some which are already known, that Muslim League did not accept the concept of one Constituent Assembly. Instead, it demanded two separate Constituent Assemblies for a separate Pakistan state, and there could be a host of other reasons, which neither is this a platform to discuss, nor Granville Austin speaks about it. So, however, Austin speaks about is the time period after World War II. Suddenly, we see that the electoral gamble does not pay off. Yes, electoral results are more or less a gamble, and that is true for every election. But that was unbelievably true in the case of 1945 election. So England goes after World War II, after the World War II finishes. In September of 1945, England goes to elections. Now, when England goes to elections, on the one hand is Winston Churchill leading the Conservatives, and on the other hand is all others. Why do I say it with all practically that disdain? Because I realize, or probably you should realize, that Winston Churchill was a hero of British victory in the World War II. His speeches, his leadership, I don't think there should be anyone raising any kind of question mark on Churchill's leadership during the dark days of the War of Britain, or for that matter, time period after that also. Everyone and anyone, all electoral pundits, must have actually placed the last dollar in bet that Winston Churchill is going to sweep this elections, win this election. But suddenly something happens, and that's why I call this as an electoral gamble. So I don't want to say there is no better word for this part, or there is nothing on record to suggest that why did Winston Churchill lose that election, and let's not get into this part. However, a newly elected Labour government comes. Clement Attlee becomes the Prime Minister of England, and he started. And this Clement Attlee had a very firm belief in what is called as the right to self-determination. Now, there is a backstory to this. When United States of America had joined World War II in the favor of the Allied forces, which later became a term, they met somewhere at the sea. Now, that that entire thought process, Roosevelt and everyone, Winston Churchill and all the Allied states, all the Western European powers, that day is called as, so that moment in history is called as Atlantic Charter. Now, United States of America was at one stage, America was itself a victim of colonization. So they wanted to charter out the world of the future. What would be the nature of the world after the World War II, or whatever war is that, will be over? Americans use the word that they cannot afford to see. They cannot be living with the fact that despite fighting a war against a fascist regime, you are now going to destroy a fascist regime and instead continue to choose with colonialism, which in somehow was not giving what is popularly called as right to self-determination. So Roosevelt insisted on that soon after World War II will be over, all the colonies will be given an opportunity to become free and make their own constitution, much to the dismay and the anguish of England and France and all other countries in the Western Europe, because primarily they were the colonial powers. But a promise is a promise, a need is a need, and US, without USA, there was no chance that the European powers could have hoped to destroy the onslaught of the Nazis. So America joined the World War II, and Britishers, they had to, much to their dismay, much to their sadness, had to accept that soon after World War II, they will allow decolonization. Now, Churchill lost the election, but Clement Attlee had become the prime minister. He, however, remembered the promise, and he was probably personally also interested in decolonization. So the first thing he does, he gets together the bunch of his ministers, forms what is called as second cabinet mission, Patrick Lawrence, Alexander's, and Cripps, and so on and so forth, and decides to send what is popularly called as the second cabinet mission of 1946, and says that let's hold elections to your constituent assembly. So somewhere in June or July of 1946, India goes for the first ever election of the Constituent Assembly by an indirect election of proportional representation and single transferable vote. So along with that, there were many peripheral issues to be settled. A formation of an interim government, a machinery by which Indians can make their own constitution, the Constituent Assembly, and also to try and resolve or buffer the situation between Muslim League and the Indian National Congress, which otherwise was on the brim of bringing to the entire nation, the entire South Asian region, a huge bloody civil war. Now, nobody had the guts, nobody had the resources, neither India nor England, to be able to contain such a civil war. So, somewhere a line had to be drawn in the middle. They had to be brought on the same page, and a constituent assembly to be formed. That's what second cabinet missions aims were very, very clear on. We ultimately went to the elections and formed our constituent assembly. So again, a small recollection. Which party was voted out of power in England in the first election post World War II? Out of power. Please remember which party was voted out of power in England in the first election post World War II. And you have 30 seconds to answer this question. Which party was voted out of power in England in the first election post World War II? And answer, of course, is A, because the Conservatives, Churchill, lost the election. I hope you can recall. So we are going page by page, Granville Austen, and we are also understanding the requirements of the MCQs that you may be asked in your UPSC examination. So the Constituent Assembly was formed on 6th of December 1946. On 9th of December 1946, it had its first session. The results of the election. So in the Constituent Assembly, a proportional representation method was adopted. For every 1 million Indians, there was supposed to be one seat in the Constituent Assembly. On an average, our population, a ballpark figure was 39 crores. So on an average, 389 seats were supposed to be filled up for the entire Constituent Assembly, of which 296 were supposed to be by election and 93 were nominated by the princely states. When the results came out, 208 went to Indian National Congress, 73 went to Muslim League, and 15 to others. It became a predominantly a one party. It was a one party as a 208. Can you imagine? So 208 members were belonging to Indian National Congress. Now that draws some kind of criticism. Some people raise their eyebrows that was it a Congress Constituent Assembly or an Indian Constituent Assembly? The answer to this is, although there was one big party, dominating the effect. But the point was that who was dominating the Constituent Assembly? That party, that Indian National Congress, was so representative of India that there's nothing to be worried about. So very beautifully said. It was like that the assembly was Congress, but Congress was India. In the sense that the Congress representatives were represented by everyone. There were everyone from every part of this country, from all religions, all kinds of understandings. Everyone was over there. They were charismatic in their appeal, they possessed immense powers. And the point was that when they said not for themselves, they said for the entire country. So I think this is a good junction when we can take a break and we can understand at a later stage that here we have reached a very important junction in the journey of making our own constitution. I hope you are enjoying this. This is a journey of our country, and you should be not only physically and mentally involved in it, but also emotionally. A very difficult zone of our life, of understanding of a nation. A young nation is to be made. Let's see how will we make it. So I hope you have enjoyed this, and you will really enjoy this entire process, because Granville Austin has written a very beautiful book, a dense book. Probably becomes difficult for a new person, a new student to read it, but I'll try and decipher it for you. I'll try and simplify it for you. And I hope you'll enjoy this. One final time, and another announcement that the foundation batch for IS 2025 will be launched. Please use the special code SEDLIVE to get a huge discount. We'll try and give you the best of education in all the subjects, prelims, mains, optionals. You get an opportunity to get a realistic chance to crack this exam. In the words of Unacademy, let's crack it. Until next time, God bless, thank you, and Jai Hind.